Right, I'm going to show you how you can calculate percentages of amounts. We're going to start with a simple sum, 25% of 40, and I'll show you two ways. There are lots of ways you can work this out. I'm going to show you two of my favorite ways, and then I'll show you some other ways, and you can choose whichever one you think is best. So let's start with the easiest way. We've just been working on fractions of amounts, so let's start by turning 25% into a fraction. So 25% is what as a fraction? Correct, it's 1/4. So we're working on 1/4 of 40. Now, as we've just learnt, finding a quarter of an amount or a fraction of amount, we simply divide by the bottom number and multiply by the numerator. Divide by the denominator, multiply by the numerator, or as you've also been seeing, you could draw it into a shape. So you could draw it into a box of a rectangular box showing 40 things. Cut your box into 4 parts and work out how many things are in each part, and that's fairly simple. 40 divided by 4 is 10. 10, 20, 30, 40, and then I simply want one of those 4 parts. So I want 1/4 of 40, which is 10. If I continue with my fraction method here though, divide by 4, multiply by 1, then that's simply 40 divided by 4 and multiply by 1, which doesn't change my answer, and I get the same answer, 10. So there's a simple way of working out 25% of a number using a fraction. Let's look at another method. I can turn my 25%, this is my favorite method for lots of these types of sums, because if you split your 25% into 10%, I need 2 10% and a 5%, because 10 plus 10 plus 5 makes 25%. Now, I also know that 10% of 40 is one of the easiest sums, because 10% of anything, 10 is 1/10 of 100, so 10% of my number is just 1/10 of my number, in which case I'm just dividing by 10. And to divide by 10, I can quite easily just remove my last 0, so I get 4. 10% of 40 is like dividing 40 by 10 and giving me 4. So when I do this as well, I get another 4. And then 5% is simply half of my 10%. So half of my 10% was 4. If half of my 10% will then be 2. And when I add these 3 up, what a surprise, I get the same answer, 10. So you can turn your percentage into a fraction, draw it out like a box, and find out which part you need to get the answer, or use your little divide and multiply to get your answer, or you can split your 25% into parts of 10s and 5s. 10s work easiest because you're just dividing by 10 to get the answer, and then make sure you add your parts up to get a solution. So there's 2 methods. Let's look at another method. The next 2 methods are a little bit more complicated, so stop the video here and give those 2 methods a go if you would like to. Percent of 40. So 25% is also 25 out of 100, or 0.25. Of 40 also means multiplied by 40. We looked last term at the fact that the word of means multiply. So 25 times 100 is 25 over 100 times by 40, or 0.25 multiplied by 40. Now I can do that as a fraction, 25 over 100 multiplied by 40. And if I want to multiply fractions, the easiest is to make them both fractions. So 40 as a fraction is 40 over 1, because 40 divided by 1 is still 40. So that's my fraction for 40. 40 wholes is 40 whole units. And similarly, I can make this one 0.25 multiplied by 40. Now both those sums look the same because they are. 25 over 100 is 0.25, 40 over 1 is 40. When multiplying fractions, I usually multiply top times top and bot times bot. But I'm going to simplify myself here and make this much easier. Let's just make a thinner pen. So I can simplify my fractions by dividing something on the top with something on the bottom. So I can very easily divide my top fraction here by 10 and my bottom fraction by 10. Divide them both by 10, they cancel out. I could even do with the 25 and the 10 over here and find something goes into 25 and into 10. So 5 goes into 25 5 times, 5 goes into 10 twice. And I could also simplify this 2 with this 4. So 2 goes into itself once, and 2 goes into 4 twice. And now, all I'm left with is 5 times 2 on the top, and on the bottom, 1 times 1, which is 10 over 1, which is 10. And I get the same solution. Now that might sound a little bit complicated, and I jumped through quite a lot of steps, but just remember I've divided things on the top of my fraction with things on the bottom, because that line in the middle of my fraction means divide. So anything I take on the top of my fraction either side and divide by the bottom, I can simplify my fraction by doing that. If I don't want to simplify, I'm just going to end up with 25 times 40 on the top and 100 times 1 on the bottom, which is 1000 over 100, and 1000 divided by 100 is still 10. Same solution, different way of approaching it. Finally, I can do my sum here, 25 times 40, and I'm going to write out a multiplication sum. But you'll notice I haven't included my decimal point. So 25 times 40, 5 times 0 is 0, 5 times 4 is 20. Finished with the 5, put in a 0 placeholder because I'm not multiplying by my 2, which is 2 tens. So 2 tens times 0 is 0. 2 tens times 40 is 800. Add those two and I get 1000. Now because I got rid of my decimal point over here, I multiplied this number by 100 to get rid of my decimal point, making it 25 over here. So now I need to divide by 100. 1, 2. 1000 divided by 100 is 10, so my answer again is 10%. Sorry, just 10. So there's 4 methods for working out a percentage of a number, and I hope that's been helpful.